of the building has been blown away.
April 1995. The United States is hit by what was then the worst ever act of terrorism on American soil.
That shot is absolutely incredible.
About a third of the building has been blown away.
They're asking everybody to move. Explosion. You could see our crew.
A government building in downtown Oklahoma City, blown up by a truck bomb. 168 people dead, 19 children among them.
All my friends are missing. I don't know where any of them are.
I'm Tammy Payne in the TV9 newsroom. If you are anywhere downtown, you've probably heard it and felt it. An explosion of some kind downtown.
Someone had attacked the heart of America.
Justice for these killers will be certain, swift, and severe. We will find them, we will convict them, and we will seek the death penalty for them.
Within 48 hours, the FBI find their man, decorated war veteran Tim McVeigh. But was this the work of a lone bomber? Conspiracy theorists reject the official story. They believe others were involved in a wider plot who have never been brought to justice. And the government is hiding its failings with a cover-up.
The government had informants in that wider conspiracy, had prior warning and prior knowledge about a threat to blow up federal buildings in Oklahoma City.
What they've tried to do is bury this whole thing. They cannot admit to the American people that they had this kind of information and then failed to stop it.
4 years before the Oklahoma City bombing, Tim McVeigh, aged 23, had returned from the first Gulf War, a decorated but disturbed hero.
I went over there hyped up, just like everyone else. Not only is Saddam evil, all Iraqis are evil. What I experienced, though, was an entirely different ballgame. And being face-to-face, close with these people, in personal contact, you realize they're just people like you. Something didn't feel right in me, but I couldn't quantify it. I couldn't say what it was.
The war in Iraq left McVeigh feeling confused and betrayed by his own government, at a time when anti-government sentiment was rife in America. McVeigh fell in with the radical right, a potent mix of white supremacists, extreme Christian fundamentalists, and heavily armed survivalist militias. They were united by a hatred of the federal authorities, who they saw as interfering with their right to bear arms.
Out of the vehicle, taking one step facing forward, where I can still see your hand.
On the 19th of April 1993, tensions between the far right and the government boiled over when law enforcement officers launched a full-scale military assault on a religious community in Waco, Texas. The raid ended a 51-day standoff, which started when 4 officers had been killed in an attempt to arrest the group's leader for stockpiling machine guns and explosives. The FBI used Army assault vehicles to fire tear gas into the buildings, but the group refused to surrender. Instead, the building went up in flames, leaving more than 80 people dead, including 22 children. McVeigh, seen here at Waco during the siege, was one of the many who came to witness the event. He was incensed.
Shaken, disillusioned, angered, that could happen in this country. The emotions it brings up make me speechless.
For the far right, Waco was a declaration of war and energized people like McVeigh to plot a suitable payback.
I lost my 3-year-old daughter and my husband and my 4-year-old. So whoever did this, I hope you're happy.
The FBI launches the largest manhunt in their history. McVeigh is quickly arrested and later convicted of using a weapon of mass destruction. He is executed by lethal injection 6 years after the bombing. Hours after McVeigh's arrest, his army buddy, Terry Nichols, surrenders to the police in the neighboring state of Kansas. He is convicted of bomb making and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But prosecutors accept that his involvement ended before the actual bombing. To this day, the case agents remain confident that they caught everyone involved.
Planning, preparing, mixing the bomb, we could only put 2 people there, Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols. We're confident that the investigation will stand the test of time, and that 100 years from now, that you'll know that it was Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols that committed this act.
1 month after the bombing, the Alfred P. Murrah Building was demolished. Case closed. But not for everyone. This is Idabel, a sleepy backwater 6 hours away from Oklahoma City. It's home to a man who has spent the last 10 years challenging the official version of events.
Sky Michi Country's morning show. Morning mayhem. Uncovering the truth. News from the other side. Sky Michi Country's morning show. Here's Dave and JD.
26 minutes after 7 o'clock, Dave the Weird Guy here with JD.
Good morning.
Are you there? Turn your microphone on.
Oh, let's get this on. Good morning.
Good morning.
What blew through here last night?
Local journalist J.D. Cash is the leading voice for those who believe that there was a wider conspiracy behind the bombing.
It's always curious to me when the government does anything.
His research has convinced him more people were involved in the bombing and that the government is covering it up.
Had the Oklahoma City bombing been properly investigated, it would have revealed a wider conspiracy. Whatever the answer to what went wrong is, must be so devastating that the government has chosen to keep this whole matter under wraps.
Cash is convinced there was at least one other bomber, and the failure to pursue him may have cost an innocent man his life. He says the evidence is in the FBI's own investigation.
The first major break that we had was discovering the rear.
The FBI traces the rear axle to a truck rental outlet in Kansas. This is where the conspiracy theory starts, 2 days before the bombing. The employees in the office say McVeigh was with another man when he rented the truck used in the explosion. The FBI quickly established the second person was not Terry Nichols. He was at his home on the day the truck was rented and the day of the attack. The manhunt begins for 2 bombers.
2 white males were associated with this vehicle. As a result, arrest warrants will be sought for these 2 males. The first man is of medium build with a light brown crew cut, and he is right-handed.
McVeigh is identified as the mystery man John Doe 1 and arrested.
The second man is also medium build. He's further described as 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with brown hair and a tattoo visible on his left arm.
What happens next is a conspiracist's dream.
John Doe number 2 remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous.
But 2 months later, the FBI calls off the search. The official line is, John Doe 2 doesn't exist. The investigators say the employees in the Ryder rental office were confused.
It now looks like the man the FBI called John Doe number 2 is actually a soldier at Fort Riley, Kansas, who had nothing whatsoever to do with the bombing and was at the Ryder Truck Agency in Junction City, Kansas the day before Timothy McVeigh came to rent a truck. The FBI now believes the rental agents were confused about when he came in.
It might be one thing that you confuse the description of him, But it's a different thing to say you confused the day.
McVeigh's lawyer, Stephen Jones, has always maintained there were others involved. He says the FBI's dismissal of the eyewitnesses at the truck rental office made no sense.
We're talking about people that are interviewed on Wednesday, late at night and in the afternoon, about events that happened 48 hours before in a small room in a business that only has half a dozen or fewer employees. They rent one rider a truck a day. So it's not like it's Grand Central Station or Walmart where there's 500 people going through and you might mistake one.
And there are more problems for the official account. On the day of the bombing, a whole series of eyewitnesses report seeing McVeigh with an accomplice.
The morning of the bombing, a tire dealer says Timothy McVeigh stopped to ask for directions to the Federal Building with someone else in the truck.
He had dark hair, maybe a dark complexion. He wasn't fair skin. I'm fair skin. I can tell the difference between fair and dark skin.
The FBI's former Deputy Assistant Director, Danny Coulson, now questions the official version. On the day of the bombing, he was in charge at the crime scene. Coulson believes the FBI might not have caught everyone involved in the attack.
We know there were 24 people that were interviewed by the FBI that said they saw Mr. McVeigh on April 19th with someone else, and they had no reason to make it up. They didn't have a dog in that fight. They didn't have any reason just to make something up. They told the agents exactly what they saw, and the agents wrote it down. If only one person had seen it, or two or three, but 24 people say, yes, I saw him with somebody else. That's pretty powerful.
The official version maintains all these eyewitnesses are mistaken. They were never called to testify in court.
They were trying to help. Some people wanted to be on television, but some people were legitimately stretching their memories to try to help. And we did consider each and every one of these eyewitness sightings because, believe you me, if we had an eyewitness sighting that we had a lot of confidence in, we would wanted to have used that witness in the bombing trials. But there was no such person.
There was immense pressure to close the case quickly. But by dismissing these eyewitnesses, the FBI sparked a host of conspiracy theories.
They needed to say John Doe 2 did not exist, because if John Doe 2 existed, then it meant a larger conspiracy than the government could prove and convict in court.
Implicating others might have saved McVeigh from execution, but he always maintained he acted alone. However, a lie detector test suggested a different story.
Well, there was a clear pattern of spikes or no spikes. And on those questions of whether there were others, whether there were others that assisted him, and whether there were others with him in Oklahoma City on the morning of April the 19th, there were spikes. The operator said the spikes indicated that his answers were deceptive. That is to say, he was lying. That in most of those cases where he said he was alone, he wasn't alone. There were others with him.
Does this ring a bell with all the witnesses were wrong in Oklahoma City?
I've heard this somewhere before.
A dozen maybe, or maybe 24 people who saw Tim McVeigh with others at crucial times in the conspiracy, well, they were all wrong. They were all seeing double and triple, quadruple.
In his hometown of Idabel, J.D. Cash spent his time investigating who McVeigh's other accomplices might have been, and new information started to come his way.
One witness has McVeigh with 3 or 4 people. So what's going on? Who are these other men? And obviously, if there's more out there, they need to be caught too.
J.D. believes the guilty have not been brought to justice, and an innocent man may have lost his life for being mistaken for McVeigh's accomplice, John Doe 2.
Kenneth Trinity was found dead in his cell at Oklahoma City's Federal Transfer Center in August of 1995. He had been awaiting a parole violation hearing. His death was ruled a suicide. Investigators claim Trinity hanged himself. Blood was found splattered throughout his cell, and pictures revealed Trinity had numerous cuts and bruises all over his body. Both local and federal investigators ruled they were self-inflicted.
Had an inkling that there could be some nexus, some connection at some time or another.
JD contacted the dead man's brother, lawyer Jesse Trentadue. He too doubted the official verdict of suicide.
I didn't know JD, had never spoken with him before. He said, describe your brother. I said, well, he's about 5'9", powerful upper body build, dark hair. And JD said to me, did he have any tattoos? And I said, yeah. And he said, where? I said, he had a dragon tattoo on his left forearm. JD, I won't tell you what he said. JD said, literally, oh shit, and said, why don't you sit down? And I said, I'm sitting down. He said, well, let me tell you this. He said, the largest manhunt in American history was ongoing when they arrested your brother. It was for John Doe 2. This is the description.
5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing approximately 175 to 80 pounds, with brown hair and a tattoo visible on his left arm below his t-shirt sleeve.
It was a perfect match. He was stopped coming across the border in San Diego from visiting some of his wife's family. The next thing we know, he's in Oklahoma, and he's dead 2 days later.
Jesse wanted to preserve the evidence. He filmed his brother's body. He believes interrogators beat Kenneth to death, thinking he was the mystery bomber.
He received 3 massive blows to the head, so severe that it ruptured the scalp to the skull, and these were massive injuries. He was literally beaten head to toe, front to back. Even the soles of his feet had been beaten, and his throat had been slashed.
The FBI case agents say Jesse's theory makes no sense.
Yeah, we were heavily involved in the bombing investigation at the time of that tragedy in Oklahoma City involving Mr. Trentadue. But we can say categorically that at no time was Mr. Trentadue considered a suspect in the Oklahoma City bombing or being a lookalike for John Doe number 2 at no time. And Larry and I were in such positions in the Oklahoma City bombing that we would have absolutely have known that had that been the case, and it was not.
The official inquiry found prison guards and the FBI had mishandled evidence and made false statements about the case. But it concluded Kenneth's death was a suicide. Yet it also said Kenneth had told a guard he thought he might have been involved in a case of mistaken identity. Working from his wood cabin in the Oklahoma hills, JD started painstakingly sifting through the entire FBI investigation. His first break came when the FBI released details of a phone card McVeigh and Nichols had used under the false name of Darrell Bridges. For the FBI, the phone card was the key to unraveling the case.
There were 685 calls altogether. They made many calls using that calling card to acquire bomb components. So we used that as a timeline as to where McVeigh and Nichols were at different times in their planning the bombing.
For conspiracy theorists, the phone cards seemed to reveal that the timing of the Oklahoma City bombing was a going-away present for a white supremacist facing execution on death row. One particular call, made 2 weeks before the bombing, had caught JD's attention. It was to the Murrah family in a place called Elohim City, a white separatist community hidden in the Ozark Mountains. The federal authorities had plans to raid it months before the bombing. McVeigh had made this call immediately after speaking to a Ryder truck rental office.
I decided maybe I need to be interested in Elohim City. It had a history of dealing with people that were into the white power movement. So I arranged for a trip up there.
Elohim City appears on no map. It's far away from all main roads, off the beaten track. The residents of Elohim City adhere to a religion known as Christian identity. They believe white Northern Europeans are the true lost tribe of Israel, descendants of God's chosen people.
We're about done, Kathy.
The community is led by Pastor John Millar. He says they are entirely peaceful. He has no idea why McVeigh was calling or who spoke to him.
We don't know. It might have been my sister-in-law. She was up there in the office, and we were not really sure on that. You know, it's just, they ask you years later, did you get a phone call that nobody identified themselves for less than a minute, and it's a business number where you're trying to run a business out of? Well, that could have happened. So we don't say that didn't happen. We don't know. We don't know who was on the other end of the line or anything like that. It didn't make any sense to us.
At the time, it was John's father, Robert, who has since died, who faced the media and issued denials about links to Tim McVeigh.
The community's spiritual leader says he's never heard of McVeigh.
I never met anybody by the name of Tim McVeigh. I don't remember ever seeing anybody that looks like his picture.
First, I want to ask you about the fact that there have been reports that bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh was in contact with the people in your compound.
I have no idea. Why on earth would he want to telephone us?
We never saw Tim McVeigh except on television. Simple as that, he never was here.
The people at Allen City denied that they even knew anything about any phone call. They don't know Tim McVeigh. There was a quick press conference out there and the media all went home.
But conspiracy theorists did find a connection between Elohim City and the bombing of the government building in Oklahoma. On April the 19th, 1995, the very day McVeigh blew up the Murrah Building, Richard Wayne Snell, a hero to the far right, was about to be buried at Elohim City Command.
By One Survival magazine as the #1 civilian SWAT team in our country. And we went overboard way more than probably any other group did. This was one of our church services. This was sort of the dancing kind of thing we learned from Elohim City. Coming together, raising up our hands. This was really a fun thing for us. This was a good positive thing we learned from Elohim City that sort of bonded us together even more than what we were previously, and we had a good bond.
I agree with Kerry that hopefully we did bring some spirituality to Kerry Noble and to the people that were involved in the CSA.
We introduced, of course, to them the gun aspect, and within a short period of time they started buying guns and carrying weapons and camouflage outfits and that kind of stuff also.
They did have some weapons. They had a lot of weapons up there, and I don't know, as we got a little bit larger, more of the people got more hunting weapons and things like that. And we do believe in the Second Amendment. We do believe in the Second Amendment, but the right to bear arms. We do believe in that. That's a part of our constitutional right, and we teach that, but we're not interested in using those to hurt anyone.
The CSA made no secret of its desire to start a war with the federal authorities. The target for their attack was the same government building Tim McVeigh later adopted as his target.
For Waco originated in that building.
Whatever the truth, it's gone to the grave with McVeigh, Snell, and Millar. But the theories never die. J.D. Cash became convinced the comings and goings at Elohim City held the key to finding the missing bomber's identity. His newspaper, the McCurtain Daily Gazette, became a campaigning voice for those who questioned the official version of events. It published a never-ending series of articles alleging a wider conspiracy. What its star reporter J.D. hadn't bargained for was the exotic cast of characters his investigation would reveal. A glamorous undercover agent with a swastika tattoo, a mysterious German who skipped the US, a gang of bank-robbing neo-Nazis, and the extraordinary claim that the authorities had prior knowledge of the bombing but failed to stop it. J.D. says it all began when he got a call from a man claiming he was with Interpol.
He very briefly explains to me that he knows I've been doing some digging on the bombing, and that he's at his wit's end with trying to get the FBI to do their job. And about this point, I'm kind of sympathetic to that view too. And he said, here's what you need to be asking. You need to know about Andy the German. What do you know? I said, hell, I don't know anything about Andy the German. He goes, Andreas Strassmeyer. Gives me his birth date, gives me some information about the guy. Check it out. I said, why? He said, because he's in tight with McVeigh on this thing. He's crucial.
JD called McVeigh's legal team.
I said, tell me about Andy the German. And the individual goes, how did you hear that name? And I said, I just got this phone call. And the person goes, let me just say this. That is who we have since learned that Tim McVeigh was trying to reach at Elohim City. That is someone we are very interested in as well.
Back at Elohim City, they remember Andreas Strassmeyer, the man Tim McVeigh was trying to call.
Well, he's a German nationalist, and the people that brought him here and asked if he could stay here a little while said he was, they told us he was legal, but he couldn't work. He didn't have a visa to work, and wanted to know if we could house him, and thought maybe he could be a little bit of help around our little village and things like that. And so that's how he got here, and he stayed here, I don't know exactly how long, a year or so. And so he liked to talk about military things like that, and he's from Germany and things like that. But this is one of the earlier buildings that we built. It's just a trailer house attached to it a little bit, and that's where Andy stayed some of the time, most of the time when he was here for back there in '95 or whenever it was, and that's where he stayed, right there.
By the time JD got back to Elohim City, a year after the bombing, Andreas Strassmeyer was no longer there. A source in the far-right movement put JD in touch with a neo-Nazi called Carol Howe. She was well known within the Aryan movement. Her nickname was Freya, meaning Aryan goddess.
I believe when all the other avenues have been exhausted, that we must turn to violence.
JD phoned Howe to ask about Andy the German.
I launched into, tell me what you can about Andy Strassmeyer. And right off the bat she says, well, what I can tell you is that he was very, very, very much into blowing up federal buildings. And I was stunned. By luck, I was taping the call. She said, I know a lot about what's going on up there. And she goes, I warned him what was going to happen. Well, I just about fell over.
Howe then made an extraordinary admission. She told JD she had turned on the movement and was working undercover at Elohim City. She had been a paid federal informant for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms.
I have been so honored that the ATF would come to me and ask me to work for them as an informant.
JD discovered that months before the Oklahoma City bombing, Howe was filing reports warning the federal authorities that Elohim City was preparing for war against the government. And she named Andreas Strassmeyer as a key player and head of security. But her version of events is strongly denied.
He never was put in any official position at all whatsoever. Young men like to play young men's games, you know, and so he liked to walk around with his camouflage on, and that didn't seem to bother us too much if that made him happy.
Howe also reported that Strassmeyer was interested in attacking federal buildings. He wanted to destroy the US government and advocated direct action, assassinations, bombings and mass shootings.
I don't think you'll find anyone that ever would agree with her that we ever preach about the violent overthrow of this government. We do preach that we are believing that there will be a new government set up by our Lord and Savior Christ Jesus, but that has nothing to do with the, violent overthrow of this government that we love so much.
JD's expose that the federal authorities may have had prior knowledge became a national news story.
I gave them warnings, targets, specific targets, addresses of targets, names of targets. I know of too many people that were talking about that building, talking about Oklahoma City, talking about doing something on that date using a truck bomb. It cannot be coincidence to use that many specifics.
The conspiracy theory says the government had clear warning, yet failed to prevent the bombing, and then covered it up. Some decisions in the FBI's investigation puzzle even those on the inside.
It wasn't until after I left the case, some months later, that I know that FBI headquarters told them to close down the investigation on Oklahoma City, which has some very significant connections to Mr. McVeigh and to previous bombing attempts. So I don't know why they did that. That's something that, and it's very unusual. And never in my career did I ever have FBI headquarters tell me not to investigate something. They would often suggest things to do or courses of action to follow or other leads we may have missed, but I never had them ever say, don't investigate that part of the case. That was a total aberration to me.
That's absolutely not true. I didn't know that Danny had said that, but there was no direction from above that we weren't to go down any avenue
that the investigation led.
There was none of that whatsoever. That we were never told or suggested or intimated that we shouldn't look under every rock. In fact, in this investigation, I feel like we uncovered more rocks than have ever been uncovered in the history of the FBI, and at times we over-investigated parts of the case. But you know, in retrospect, I'm glad we did that.
What is certain is Strassmeyer disappeared in the middle of the FBI's investigation. He resurfaced in Germany, having slipped across the border to Mexico, traveling via Paris and Frankfurt to Berlin.
To my knowledge, he was never interviewed by any FBI agents. He was interviewed by 2 assistant United States attorneys with an FBI agent present on the phone taking notes, but there was never a face-to-face, sit-down, come-to-Jesus meeting with the FBI. That never occurred. And, I mean, one of the possibilities could have been that they could have issued a material witness warrant for him and gone over and got him and brought him home, or brought him here, and see exactly what he knows. And he might not have told us anything, but at least it was a piece of the puzzle that we should have looked at.
Here you have Andrew Strassmeyer, who's a German, who's overstayed in this country, who has expressed to a government agent, an informant, that he wants to kill government employees, blow up federal buildings, that he is a director of security at Elohim City. He wears a swastika. He's a man of mystery. And yet, even though he knows our client, even though our client tried to call him, the government's not interested in talking with him. Why?
Was Strassmeyer at the heart of a conspiracy? What was his relationship with McVeigh? After we contacted his American lawyer, then an intermediary in Berlin, Strassmeyer agreed to go on camera and comment on Carol Howe's reports.
What might be true is that after events like Waco, there was a lot of rhetoric. You know, you're angry, said somebody should get those bastards. You know, or how would they like it if their families get murdered in the same way? You know, and of course this rhetoric was going on, and that's what it is. People get angry to say things, but it's a big difference saying those things in anger or actually planning those activities. And if I'm a terrorist who actually committed an act of terrorism against Americans, no protection, no father in the world could protect me from the wrong arm of the law.
Strassmeyer says he only met Tim McVeigh once at a gun show 2 years before the Oklahoma bombing, where he'd given him a business card. He said he didn't know McVeigh, nor why he tried to call him 2 weeks before the bombing.
You know, I don't know why he called, you know, never talked to him. All I can do is speculate. There are certain options. You know, I don't think he wanted to recruit anybody. You wouldn't recruit somebody you never met, except a 10-minute conversation and say, by the way, I'm going to bomb a federal building, you want to join in or what? I mean, you don't do that, right?
Strassmeyer says Carol Howe was mixing fact with fantasy and was a self-confessed liar. The FBI also questioned her reliability, even though she was a paid federal informant.
Carol Howe's statement, even after the bombing, continued to change to fit the scenario that she wanted it to fit, and that's why we could not use her as a witness ourselves in the bombing and chose not to do so as a result of that, because when you put a witness on at trial, you need to be confident that what they're saying is truthful.
She came to them and said, these people over in Elohim City are talking about blowing up federal buildings and killing people and assassinating government employees. That seemed so far-fetched that they didn't give it any credit. Well, after it happened, then they realized they'd been caught with their pants down. So to cover up their own ineptitude, they invented a series of lies. Wasn't important, we were busy, there was no John Doe 2, he left the country, he wasn't involved. I don't know. I don't know what happened in Oklahoma City. I only know what didn't happen. The official version is not the complete story.
More than 10 years after the bombing, there are still strong suspicions surfacing to suggest others were involved. It's even become a subject for academic study. Mark Ham is professor of criminology at Indiana State University. He's an expert on the far right and the author of a book on the Aryan Republican Army, a white supremacist group that funded its actions by robbing banks.
There's a plague upon this land, and only by cleansing it can you get the plague off of yourself and your people.
Ham sent his manuscript to the group's leader, Peter Langan. He is still serving a life sentence for 19 bank robberies that netted the ARA $250,000.
He read that manuscript and wrote back, "It's pretty good, but I think what you're missing here is the angle of the Oklahoma City bombing." So here is the major character I'm working on telling me to go look at a connection between the ARA and McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing.
Ham used court documents to construct timelines for Tim McVeigh and the ARA. He says their movements show remarkable similarities in the run-up to the Oklahoma bombing.
Same time, same date, same place. And these are tend to be not Los Angeles or Chicago. These are places near Fayetteville, Arkansas, Overland Park, Kansas, Kingman, Arizona. So what we're talking about here typically are places where they would have to be there for a particular reason. You've got, in a movement at the time, of maybe some 5,000 to 10,000 hardcore anti-government activists. And the chance that 4 of the most violent would be in the same geographical location on the same day has the statistical probability of 1 to millions. So this cannot be a random event.
J.D. Cash also believes that McVeigh was talking to the ARA.
We will do whatever's necessary to liberate this land.
He obtained a statement from Jennifer McVeigh, Tim's sister, which seems to support the conspiracy theory.
She sat down with the FBI and she goes, "My brother was involved with a group of bank robbers." And I'm paraphrasing the document. What she does do is admit to a felony. She said, "I laundered some proceeds from a bank robbery that my brother had something to do with." I'm not saying he actually robbed the bank, but he was involved in more of the planning aspects of it. And from a large amount of bills, $100 bills, he gave me a few.
The FBI say there is no connection between the Oklahoma bombing and the ARA. Just a series of coincidences. that fall well short of hard evidence.
You know, when you say there are links because someone was in a general vicinity within a few-day period, that doesn't mean that they met together. There are no links, no common, there's no calls to them, there's no putting them in the same motel, there's no meetings that were observed between these individuals because it didn't happen.
But Professor Ham suggests another reason for the call made by McVeigh to Elohim City. He asked for Strassmeyer, but that was only part of the picture.
Staying with Strassmeyer on that very day were 3 members of the Aryan Republican Army: Kevin McCarthy, Mike Brescia, who lived there, and Scott Stediford. So this raises the possibility that instead of just calling to be social and say he was on his way through, that McVeigh was actually looking for an accomplice to help him build the bomb and deliver it in Oklahoma City.
Strassmeyer accepts he was in contact with members of the ARA.
2 or 3 times they were passing through and spent the night over in my place. And at that point, we know now they were part of this ARA, and they were posing as traveling musicians. And they had, like, it was kind of funny, they had their that guitar cases with M16s in there and ammunition, and on top of the guitar case they had the guitars. That's how they fooled the law enforcement. In this little old van, beat-up van, they posed as traveling musicians. And later they even sold me the van, and I asked, everything all right with that vehicle, something I should know? And I said, no, everything is cool. And it happened to be the getaway vehicle for the bank robberies, which I didn't bother to tell me. So if I'd known that, I would have dumped this thing over a cliff, probably.
Strassmeyer says he didn't find out that his friends were in the ARA until after he had left Elohim City. Danny Coulson is not impressed.
Well, you know, a person can claim a lot of things, but you're known by the company you keep. We learned that from the time we're little children. And if you're hanging around with some Aryans and the Aryans are involved in criminal activity, it's kind of hard to say that you know anything about it. It's like be like hanging out with the choir and didn't know they sang. It's exactly the same type thing. And he knew what they were up to. He knew what he was doing there. And we should have interviewed him.
The Oklahoma bomb has spawned a host of conspiracy theories. What they have in common is a fundamental distrust of anything official. Conspiracy piles on conspiracy, offering ever more elaborate interpretations of the same event. In Washington, D.C., Lieutenant Colonel Roger Charles, a retired U.S. Marine, has also been investigating the Oklahoma bombing. He believes the cover-up can only be explained by a sting operation that went too far and hinges on Andy the German.
Strassmeyer is a strange duck in anybody's book. There's nothing in Strassmeyer's files that is routine, meets normal expectations, or is done in accordance with what we discovered were standard procedures in effect at the time.
Charles has gathered documents that were leaked from within the FBI.
Well, the key document, I think, for me was the January 4, 1996 teletype from the director of the FBI, Louis Freeh, to a number of field offices.
Although the name on the document is blacked out, the gap makes up 23 letters and spaces, the same amount as Andreas Karl Strassmeyer. If correct, the document shows McVeigh made another attempt to call Strassmeyer just 2 days before the bombing. It also shows a source had told the FBI that Strassmeyer allegedly had a lengthy relationship with Timothy McVeigh. And the FBI knew in advance that Strassmeyer was planning to leave the US via Mexico.
You know, you can't look at this and come to any other conclusion, I think, any reasonable person, when you look at it in totality, you're going to conclude that Andy Strassmeyer is protected.
The FBI say critics only choose information that suits them and stretch it to fit their theory.
A lot of times the teletypes put in puts in, it's not evidence in itself, it's summaries and it's thoughts to, we should explore this to see if there are links or if there's a tie-in, because we were trying to do everything to explore every possibility of every link that was to this.
Any time that we received any information that was a possibility, we would send out a teletype or an electronic communication to another field office in another state to get busy and look at this and see if there's anything to it, find out everything you can about it.
Danny Coulson also has suspicions about Strassmeyer.
There's a lot of questions who he is, who he works for. Does he work for someone in the United States? Does he work for the federal government, or did he work for a government overseas? Did he work for the Israelis? The Israelis certainly have an interest in looking at neo-Nazis. I mean, because of their history. The Germans have a significant problem with neo-Nazis in their country, and they were not happy with our investigations here. Was he working for them? I don't know the answer to it. What I do know is he wasn't just bumming around.
It might have made sense for Germany to send agents to the United States. They were concerned about American neo-Nazis publishing racist propaganda for distribution in Germany. 2 years before the Oklahoma bombing, the FBI's director, Louis Freeh, had traveled to Germany to discuss these issues with his counterparts. Conspiracy theorists say this explains Strassmeyer's presence in the United States.
Strassmeyer was an operative of the German government over here reporting to the German government and the FBI about his activities with the neo-Nazis.
Skeptics claim Strassmeyer wasn't just observing the far right. He played a much more sinister role.
I think it's very clear that Strassmeyer was pushing these people, and that if it turns out that he was an agent for someone, then he pushed way too hard. And there becomes the big problem. That's why you have a cover-up.
I think he has an idea of what happened, but he can't tell the truth about it, because it would then expose his role as being a provocateur in setting up the conditions and promoting the bombing itself, even though he expected the bombing to be prevented.
No, I wasn't involved at all with Timothy McVeigh or the bombing. You know, one thing I said about me, that I'm not the key figure in the mystery. A, you're an undercover government agent, then you're one of the good guys, or you're an international Islamist, neo-Nazi, Christian identity, whatever, terrorist. Of course, there is one third option, that you're not either one of it, like most people on God's earth are. And that option is completely disregarded by most people. But that's the truth.
J.D. Cash and Roger Charles believe that after the disaster of Waco, federal agencies needed to rescue their reputation with a high-profile success. What better than to foil a bomb plot in the heart of America? But according to the theory, the feds failed to stop McVeigh and his accomplices in time. If this is right, the government bears some responsibility for the death of 168 people. And that needed to be covered up.
It's been sometimes accused of being a sting gone wrong. We don't play games with people's lives like that. And there were too many people in the Federal Building, and we would never carry out any kind of a sting operation like that or be involved in anything of that nature. Or if we'd had any information beforehand from any informants about a potential bombing of the Federal Building, I can assure you that we would have taken immediate action against those individuals to prohibit anything of this nature.
It looks like part of the building has been blown away. We'll have to back around the other side so I can get a better view of it.
The victims of the bombing have a permanent memorial in Oklahoma City.
I'm not sure exactly how many. We've got the word that there might be a daycare center down in this.
The conspiracy theorists are convinced the bombing resulted from a botched sting operation. And in order to hide its mistakes, the government has allowed killers to go free. They claim they've found the key elements to the conspiracy. The government knew the Murrah Building was the target of choice for the far right. They had prior warning of an attack. And McVeigh and his accomplices were known to the FBI. All these elements had one common factor: Elohim City.
It's an interesting place that collects an assortment of folks involved in a variety of activities throughout this. That doesn't necessarily mean that they did them in concert or in conjunction with each other, and the evidence actually rules against that they did. But we don't deny the fact that Elohim City, you know, is a significant place with a lot of characters coming in and out and residing there.
The subjects of the conspiracy theories say it's ruined their lives. They say there's no evidence against them, and they wish it would end.
I used to buy into, you know, you read this, hey, this is intriguing, maybe this happened, maybe the government's covering this up, maybe somebody else is covering this other thing up, until you become the object of these conspiracy theories, and you know the facts do not add up to it at all, and they have a bunch of little dots that they put together that makes a picture that's altogether different than the true picture, and it sort of makes you not very quick to buy into conspiracy theories after that.
It's hard to believe such a traumatic event was the work of a lone bomber. The FBI say their investigation was exhaustive. Conspiracists say key facts were overlooked. Both sides agree we must never forget the victims.
I know a lot of people that were killed in the bombing. I know a lot of people that were in the bombing that survived, and family members who survive, and I just watch them. Every time that one of these conspiracy theories comes out, I get phone calls from the bombing victims. Is there anything to this, John? What about this? When baseless allegations are made, it sends the victim family members on tremendous emotional difficulties, and I wish that didn't have to occur.
The families that lost their daughters, moms and dads, and, you know, it's real. 168 people's real. If there's ever a crime in this state, in the state of Oklahoma, that ever deserved to be solved, it's the Oklahoma City bombing case.
The answer is, frankly, for a federal grand jury. Appoint somebody, give them grand jury authority, and go in and find out what happened. People in mainstream America, especially the families of the victims, want to know, did we get them all? And we need to answer some questions for those people.
Find out more about this programme and others in the Conspiracy Files series at our website bbc.co.uk/conspiracy files. Test yourself on the biggest modern conspiracy stories and tell us what you think.
You know, the gate's open. You know, do your thing, man. Here, give him some Coke. All Charlie's friends get free Coke.